Hi, everybody. Welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is your host, Valerie, and I have Nathan here by my side. Hello, Nathan Hamaker.
Hello. Good to be back. How are you?
I am good. We are very excited because we have been working really hard on a new series here on the Friday side of the Latter-day Struggles podcast, where, as you well know, we are talking about all the various ways in which we can transcend and include Mormonism. Okay, now this is going to be a big topic because we are going to really, is it fair to say, Nathan, that we are going macro here? We're really kind of going big picture and looking at human evolution and looking at, okay, on the one hand, we are saying, we're proposing on the Latter-day Struggles 2.0 that we as human beings are evolving towards godhood, that we are as individuals, if you're here on a faith journey, you're awakening, right? You are moving in the direction towards an awakening to who you always and already were. You're just realizing it. Okay.
Yeah. So if I could, I want to use an example. So when you and I were younger parents, our daughter, one of our daughters would come home. She came home from church one time and she was really upset by something that was said at church. She was really upset by somebody at church saying that the world is becoming more and more wicked, and that the world is moving further and further away from God the more that time goes on. And she said to us, I don't agree with that. She says, I think the world in a lot of ways is getting better and better. And she brings up some things that you and I talked about in preparing for this. She's like, there are more rights for women. There are more acknowledgements of LGBTQ rights. And, we no longer pathologize LGBTQ, as being sick or something that needs to be fixed. There are more rights for minorities, and again, talking specifically in the United States, right? But 150 years ago, we enslaved our African brothers and sisters, and then we freed them, and then we gave them a half of a right to vote, and then we gave them the full right to vote, and then we had separate but equal, and now we're fully integrated. And she's like, I think we're getting better, not worse. And that is a fair acknowledgement that she was mapping that as a society, and along with that, she as an individual was growing, but she was mapping as in her growth that society was in fact in many ways getting better. And she was pushing back against this general narrative that we hear in the LDS church that the world is getting more and more wicked. So she was acknowledging this very paradox that you and I are jumping into. So the first response is that as we evolve and become more psychologically healthy and developed beings, with that comes bigger problems. So let's use a really simple example. 200 years ago, if you wanted to travel across from the United States to the United Kingdom, you had to take a train across the United States, and you had to get on a boat and go across a boat and get to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and then you could get to Europe. Okay, now we can throw 500 people on an airplane and get there in 8 hours. Okay, airplanes have made the world a better place. We can integrate ourselves into other cultures much more easily. We can get around to see our families. We can, go on these exotic vacations that weren't dreamed of 200 years ago. But airplanes crash. And if an airplane goes down, hundreds and hundreds of lives are lost in an instant. And they're huge news, and it's very devastating, and thousands and thousands of people can be affected. So the question is, are we better off because we have airplanes? Is the advantage of traveling and making the world a smaller place, does that outweigh the tragedies that happen on occasion a few times a year when a plane crashes? That's the paradox, right?
Many of you out there are thinking to yourself, maybe like, well, but no, who does that? Like, how does a progressive work with a conservative? Well, and the reason why you're probably thinking that is precisely because most of us live and occupy a level of consciousness development that isn't capable of doing it all that well, right? And therefore, if you look at the center of gravity in our nation here in the United States of America, the progressive wing of the political movement is more consciously developed. They are further along in their consciousness development, but not quite far enough along to know how to transcend and include. Okay. And that's why what I am working towards, and other people that are committed to sort of spreading the good word of this integral theory, are basically saying we've got to get to the next level of consciousness development, because it takes a lot of consciousness development to get to the point where we can say, I get it. I get it. I understand the values of the Christian or the religious right. I get their values. I may not understand, or I may not agree with all of the things that they stand for, but I understand why they stand for them, because it's very, very likely that I used to stand for them myself.
Yeah.
And therefore, until we can do that, we are going to continue to struggle with what is frequently called in this day and age, the culture wars. Here's the deal, that every human being starts at ground zero with the ability to take the perspective of literally nobody, not even themselves. An infant does not have an ability to reflect upon itself. As it evolves and its consciousness awakens, it becomes aware of itself and its own needs, which is when it can cry and tell the grown-ups that it needs, food or whatever, right? As that infant evolves and its consciousness awakens, its ability to take the perspective of more people advances. All of a sudden, it cares more about it cares more about more than just itself. It cares about the safety of it's the big people, its siblings, its family. Human beings oftentimes evolve enough to where their ability to take the perspective of others grows quite significantly, to where it can take the perspective, in the case of our Latter-day Saint population, I can take the perspective and really see in you all of the good things, because I get you. You're Mormon. Like, I get your perspective, and I will protect and defend you till the death.
Yeah. So I think basically, if I were going to summarize this in my own words, this is what I would say. Human beings are quite capable of developing in certain areas, but oftentimes lag in other areas. And so the issue here, when we want to use the example, for instance, of Nazi Germany, is you have a group of scientists and you have a group of military strategists who are extremely bright. And they are leading edge in terms of physics, they're leading edge in terms of medicine, they are the leading edge in terms of chemistry, and they are developing medicines and weapons and chemicals and bombs using these incredibly bright scientific minds. But from a psychological standpoint, these are really underdeveloped human beings. And so they're using these really advanced technologies because their scientific minds are so developed in incredibly inhumane ways, because their interpersonal development is so poor. And so I think what Ken Wilber is getting at here is you have these uneven developments where parts of a person can be really, really developed and parts of a person can be really underdeveloped. And the underdeveloped part of the person takes the developed part of the person and turns it into a weapon of mass destruction, to use a metaphor.
Okay. Last two quotes as we close this series. First one is attributed to Martin Luther King Jr. He says this: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." I thought about this as I was preparing the series, because it does sometimes seem that if everything ultimately is going the right way, to move or to bend that arc, it doesn't happen on its own. And then the second quote is from Ken Wilber. He says this: "We are part and parcel of a single and all-encompassing evolutionary current that is in itself spirit in action, the mode and manner of spirit's creation, and thus is always going beyond what went before." I'm going to pause there. Spirit in action is another word for God. We are part ourselves of God unfolding. And what is happening in the future is just simply God awakening and unfolding. Whatever is coming ahead of us is more evolved than what came before us. But it doesn't happen very smoothly. There will be leaps, and then there will be plateaus, and then there will be leaps again, and there will be deaths, and there will be rebirths, and then there will be lurches, and there will be stumbles. And he talks even about bruising, that the universe bruises its metaphysical knees sometimes, that sometimes there are massive wars that sidetrack us from ultimate development, but the trajectory is forward moving because it is God that is unfolding in humanity itself. God began unfolding the instant the world was created at the Big Bang. That's what God is, and that is what we are a part of. And so I want to just, hopefully this resonates. If this is something that is, I know this is robust, new, and different, which is why next episode for you all is this in audiobook form. You will get to listen to all of these episodes back to back so that you can really integrate them. So anything you want to say as we close, Nate?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Thank you all so much for being our people. Thank you for supporting Latter-day Struggles 2.0. And if you're listening to this, I know you. I know where you are. You're on this deep journey of transformation, not wanting your Mormon faith crisis to go to waste. You want to become deeper and more capable of love. And you're wanting to use your Mormonism as the sort of the catapult or the catalyst of this deepening version of yourself. And if you're here, I commend you, because I think that's what we're all trying to do as we listen to this. So thank you for being my people. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. If this podcast has supported your faith journey, we invite you to explore the many ways you can continue your healing and growth with us. On our website, you'll find support and processing groups, marriage and parenting courses, and free resources to support where you are in your faith journey. You can also join Valerie in the live fellowship gatherings throughout the year, where we connect, process the podcast, and build meaningful friendships with others on similar paths. If cost has ever been a barrier, we offer podcast scholarships funded by listener donations. To explore all of these offerings, visit the link in today's show notes or go to latterdaystruggles.com. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you, leaving a 5-star review is one of the most powerful ways to help others find this work. Latter-day Struggles is proud to be part of the Dialogue Podcast Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.